This video is for 2D Studio Level 3 specialty markers. All right, so a couple things that I wanted to chat with you guys about that you will need. There's a few different types of markers here, and hopefully in the future we'll get more. But currently, the biggest ones that we're using are the Sharpies, which are on the 2D on the top shelf. Chalk markers, which are on the very left side on the top shelf, and calligraphy markers. All right, so these are the ones that we're going to do. So you should probably go and get a couple of the calligraphy markers, a couple of the different types of Sharpie markers, and a couple of the chalk markers. You can also use these markers, which these are technically open to you, but they're good for comparison. I want you to be able to compare them. Also, remember, this piece of paper represents your sketchbook page. Okay, so please have your sketchbook out, and we are creating a new page called Specialty Markers. Okay, it's probably good if you keep all of these pages together because they will definitely help you know how to find things in your sketchbook. Also, if you want to go ahead and pause the video, well, let me make sure that you know what to take. I would take at least one different type of Sharpie marker. There are extra fine points, and chisel tip. All right, so I would grab at least one of each of those. I would grab one or two chalk markers, and then I would grab one or two calligraphy markers. And if you want to grab a couple of different ones here for the Crayola, you can. Also, if you want to grab different types of paper, I grabbed a piece of watercolor paper here, and I grabbed a canvas paper. Because one of the things, and go ahead and pause it, and when you have those materials, I would say come back. And if you're back by now, there are some things that I want you to keep in mind that you can look for when you're comparing things. And as you get further with more things that you're able to use, you're going to be asking yourself, okay, what are the differences on surfaces? What's the difference between when I use markers on, say, my sketchbook page, a watercolor page, and a canvas page, right? Those can be some of the discoveries that you make. Also, what's the difference between the different types? What are the differences between Sharpies, Crayolas, chalk markers, and calligraphy pens? Are there differences between them? What can they do if I add ... Maybe you want to add a little water to them. Maybe you want to combine them. Maybe you want to try something a little bit different that you want to add to them. Can I erase or dilute the markers? What interesting combinations can I make? Do they work on fabric? Maybe you want to get a fabric square and see how do markers show up on fabric. Okay, so these are just some ideas that I want to get you thinking about, thinking outside the box. You are welcome to use those things if you're signed off on them. If you want to grab a fabric square, that's totally fine if you haven't been approved for it, but I just want to make sure that you guys are kind of keeping those things in mind, okay? All right, so if I start out with Sharpies, some of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to check out the tip, okay? So with a thin marker, you notice that, make sure you guys can see this really well here. So I'm using the tip here, and I notice it's very thin how I hold it. And when I hold the tip down, I notice that it makes a really big dot. That's interesting. It makes a very big dot. And I'm also trying to see what the size of these are. They can kind of, if I lessen my pressure, does it do anything? Maybe a little bit, not too much, it's still pretty dark. Versus what happens if I use a fine tip marker? Well, I definitely notice that it's bigger in size. If I hold it down, yep, definitely making a dot, so that's similar. And what about if I use a chisel tip? What is the difference here? definitely thicker. I noticed that it's at an angle, so I can do thin and thick, but either way they're both bigger. Can I hold it down and have it make a big dot? Yes, it does. Absolutely. So those are a few things that I'm noticing that are the difference between this. Can I erase them? Nope, it does spread it if it's not quite dry. Like if I try to erase these, definitely doesn't erase, right? Oh, also I noticed that it soaks through. So that's not a good thing. If it soaks through, you want to make sure that we clean it right away. And as you're noticing, it doesn't come off very well. So you're probably going to have to go get some steel wool or some one of those green scrubbies to get this off. The wise thing to do would be to probably use it, probably use another piece of paper under it, okay? So these are some discoveries that I'm making. So one, markers don't erase, okay? Some of you might have known that already. If you do, then that one shouldn't count. Two, if I hold down the tip, it creates a larger dot. Also, I noticed this is extra fine tip. This is fine tip. And this is thick tip. Okay, so this is obviously 2 to 3 times as thick as the extra fine tip, and then this one is probably 2 to 3 times as thick as the fine tip. Okay, so those are some things. Now what if I create, and I notice that it also soaks through, so number 3 might be soaks through sketch paper. But what if I use my canvas? All right, will it do the same thing? Okay, so let's try the thickest one here. I'm gonna set this down. Will it do the same thing if I use my canvas? I'm holding the marker down, I'm holding the marker down, I'm holding the marker down. I don't really see that it's not making a big round piece. It just holds it down right where it is. It looks like it's definitely wet longer. So it looks like there's a resistance bit, but it's not soaking through or making a bigger dot, and it's definitely not going through to the back, if you can see. So those are different things. So I might write, and you can do this on paper if it's easier, does not soak through or expand on canvas. Okay, that's an interesting discovery, right? The difference on the paper is quite a difference. The next thing you might want to try are the chalk markers, okay? And I'm going to see the difference here. So I'm going to try it over here. Let's see what happens when I use a chalk marker. What if I hold this down? Let me see if this goes through. Okay, this might be a discovery that I want to make and see if it goes through to the other side like the other one. It's a liquid chalk marker. So it didn't expand too much, and it didn't go through to the other side. So that's a good thing, right? The other thing, so we can mark that down, all right? I'm not going to continue to write this. I want you guys to write it the way that you think you should. But I am giving you some ideas here. Does this spread? When I use my finger and try to spread the Sharpies, they don't really spread, right? Once they're dry. What about the chalk marker? Does this spread? Okay, I think it's dry now. The chalk marker spreads a little bit more. Okay, what if I add a little bit of water to the Sharpies? Do they spread then? Yep, they spread a little bit. What about the chalk marker? Well, that spreads a lot more, okay? So that's interesting. Water will spread, right? It's another, oh, sorry. Water will spread. Can I combine markers? What if I use my pink marker? Will it make purple if I go over it? And it looks like they combine together. Now, what if I do it on canvas? Oh, well, I have to be careful that I don't ruin the tip, because as you can see, it created purple. So one caution that we have to take is do not combine tips, right? We want to be careful about that with how we do that. But it can create purple, which is cool. And then once this is dry, we can check and see if it spreads on the canvas. All right, so those are a couple ideas. You can compare Crayola markers. What's the difference between Crayola markers? If I hold this down for Crayola markers, will it spread? Will it create a big dot like the other ones? Not really on this paper. It doesn't seem to go through if I hold it down here. It creates a dot, a little bit darker one, but it doesn't grow like the Sharpies do, right? And then I want to check and see, do these spread? No, they don't. Do they go through to the other side? I don't see anything, right? So these are just some of the things that you can do. It looks like they spread on here a little bit. Remember, these are washable markers. So I'm assuming that if I use some water, oh, look at that, they come right off. So that's one way that you can actually get rid of markers, okay, on canvas. Can I get rid of them here? Well, not without leaving a stain that absorbs into the paper. See, so they can definitely grow thinner and dilute, but I can't get rid of them like I can on the canvas. All right, so those are just a few ideas of things that you can do for markers. Remember, we need 10 things that you can or can't do with markers.